Hi, morning everyone. So I'm just going to cover a general introduction to LRERC for those of you that aren't familiar with us, as well as summarising where we're at with our current data holdings and mention some of the projects that we're currently involved with. Apologies that this isn't the prettiest presentation or doesn't have any interaction as such, but hopefully it will update you with where we're at. So who are LRERC? Leicestershire and Rutland Environmental Record Centre, or LRERC, sits within the Planning, Historic and Natural Environment team at Leicestershire County Council, and we work alongside our planning ecologists. We're a small team which work to collate and store species and habitat information for Leicestershire and Rutland, and this information is then shared with other organisations and naturalists on request. We're part of a national network of environmental record centres which covers the UK. And as many of you will know, we've had some changes to our team within the last year following the retirement of Sue Timms. Our new team manager has now been appointed and will be starting with us before Christmas. And we're also currently in the process of recruiting some additional planning ecologists. LRERC is run on a day-to-day basis by myself and Karen Headley. So if you need anything from us, we're the best contacts. So again, I'm sure most of you know this, but where do we get our records from? We obtain records from lots of different sources, including NatureSpot, local authority partners, the Leicestershire and Rutland Wildlife Trust, local naturalists, members of the public, ecology consultants, and many other people. We also generate some records ourselves from habitat surveying and have a huge number of records from the Leicestershire Museum Service that date back to the 1960s. So I thought, given this audience, it might be worth looking at the biggest sources of our data. And apologies for the pie charts on the next couple of slides. Hopefully you can read this one. The next one's a little bit small, but we'll deal with that. And this chart shows the general source of species records within our database, or ORCA. And as you can see, the local recording community are easily the biggest contributors to our database, with over half of all records coming from local naturalists, county recorders datasets, local recording groups such as LRERC and Rutland Nats. NatureSpot contributes a further 13% of records, which again is all local naturalists. And the Wildlife Trust data is about 10% of our database. Again, a lot of that is informed by local volunteers and naturalists and interested people. I think it just stresses the real importance of this local volunteer naturalist community. Other sources that are shown in the chart are our own data, so LRERC and previous museum service surveys. It's about 6% of records. Ecology consultants' records make up about 4%, so they're generally ones that have come in on the back of planning applications. We get about 3% of our data from iRecord. Local wildlife site records make up about 2%, and then all other sources such as national recording schemes and societies, other local authorities and members of the public make up the rest. So yeah, sorry, this is perhaps a little small, but hopefully you can just about read it. So what's on our database by taxonomic group? This is always an interesting breakdown, I think. At the moment, we have 2.9 million species records on ORCA. My attempts to make that 3 million before today failed by about 15,000 records, annoyingly. But we also have about 450,000 records that are waiting to be processed and imported, as well as a seemingly endless archive that could be extracted should we want to. Much of my day-to-day work involves obtaining, processing, importing and maintaining these records, and we use fairly strict data standards, which allows the data to be exported in a consistent and hopefully helpful way. We're very much a cupboard, and I think that if we can get everything in a similar way, it means that the data's then usable. So breaking these 2.9 million records down into taxonomic groups, we have over 60 taxonomic groups represented within our data. And as you can see, most of the records are bird records, with over 1 million records and about 35% of our database. So that's the blue section. Next up, we have over 800,000 plant records, making up about 27% of our database. Butterflies and moths comprise about 15%. And then we move into smaller representatives such as beetles at 4%, fungi and slime molds, dragonflies and mammals about 3% each, spiders and the Hymenoptera with 2%, and finally true flies with 1%. Everything else makes up about 5% of all of our records, including centipedes, bugs, mayflies, fish, fleas, and we have single records for a hornwort, a bristletail, and a quiltwort on the database. So yeah, as a general trend, birds and plants continue to be our most recorded groups. Since our last update, we've imported butterfly records collated by Adrian Russell, which has vastly increased our Lepidoptera holding. And we've also established a regular data exchange with Ian Merrill for Odonata. We do know that we still have gaps, and we're working with county recorders and other sources to try and fill these. So moving on to some of our county recorder work, time pressures have meant that we've not been as productive in contacting county recorders as we'd have liked to have been over the last year, and we do apologise for this, but hopefully we're still being responsive when needed. We have, however, been maintaining our existing data exchange agreements, providing either access to the database or outputs of data where requested. We've also been importing records that have been sent to us and been retrieving older documents from our archive for check-in. We've been ensuring that our record centre output matches the most recent local publications, for example, updating the rare plant register species searches to include the update produced in 2022 even, sorry. As always, we're aware that verification of records is very important, and we've been verifying records where we're able to, and we're hoping to roll out a new system in the next couple of months that will make it easier for local experts to verify records as and when they want to. Don't have a firm date on this yet, but I will be in touch with verifiers as soon as it is available. So moving on to our sites and habitat data, we also maintain the local wildlife site register for Leicestershire and Rutland. Local wildlife sites are non-statutory designations. We regularly update existing sites with new information, as well as seeking to identify new sites through any information submitted to us, either through the planning system, local naturalist surveys, or our own survey work. And we're currently just about to start a review of our local wildlife site criteria with our partner organisations. And as part of this, we'll be reviewing some of the species criteria, and we may be in touch with some of our local experts for advice on this. So my colleague Karen continues to complete parish-based phase 1 surveys, and this year her focus has been on Narborough. And these are beneficial as they provide a habitat record of a moment in time. The idea of these surveys is that they are repeatable, which would help to identify change of habitats on a county-wide or parish-wide scale over time. Last 2 autumns, Karen has also been completing some transect surveys of Beacon Hill, using quadrats to record the amount of heather, bilberry, bracken, gorse, and bare ground and rocks. This aims to be a baseline survey which can be repeated in a few years to make a judgment as to the success of habitat management, and with the aim of this being that the site is in favourable condition. Sorry. Some of you will be familiar with the biodiversity quality assessment. I think it's been presented in various different forums. But for those of you that haven't seen it before, in the last 3 years, LRERC have completed a biodiversity quality assessment using aerial photos of Leicestershire and Rutland. This assessed every 1 kilometre square across the area for its biodiversity interest. So positive indicators of good habitat, such as ridge and furrow grassland, good hedgerows, woodland, and habitat mosaics, as well as negative indicators, such as large areas of arable land, improved grassland, and the built environment. This has helped to identify hotspots across Leicestershire and Rutland. Unsurprisingly, this has included areas such as Rutland Water and the Charnwood Forest, seen in the sort of darker red spots. But it's also highlighted areas such as South Harborough and an area northwest of the Lyfield Forest, which may not immediately be on the radar when you think of the important areas across the 2 counties. Again, this exercise will also be repeatable, which may be useful when attempting to monitor change. It's also being used as a supporting piece of work to a number of biodiversity strategy documents. So, biodiversity strategies. We're becoming more and more involved with emerging biodiversity strategies under the Environment Act. And this is still a fairly unknown piece of work for us here at LRERC, mainly as we're still awaiting a lot of government guidance as to the actual detail of these. But it is something that we're expecting will become a focus over the next few months. There's kind of three main points to this at the moment. The first being biodiversity net gain. And this is a mandatory measurable net gain that will be introduced as part of the planning system in January. Our planning ecology colleagues are obviously leading on this, and whilst we're still waiting the final guidance, we're looking at ways that we can use this information to provide a better picture of biodiversity across Leicestershire and Rutland, both the existing and obviously any gains that are made. The planning process is clearly facilitating net gain, but we're looking at how we can record the benefits outside of the planning role, make them interesting to the wider recording community and to nature conservation generally. So as touched on in previous talks, Leicestershire County Council is the responsible authority for the Leicestershire and Rutland Local Nature Recovery Strategy, or the LRRS, and our environment team at County Hall are leading on this with the project officer Paul Killip. However, we're involved with providing some of the baseline information, as well as being on some of the working groups helping to scope the strategy. We'll no doubt also be talking to some of you about aspects of this in the near future. And we will be looking at using existing data sets, such as the plant atlas data that Jeffrey mentioned earlier. Unfortunately, we're just a little too early in my involvement of this process to be able to update this in any more detail at the moment, but it's certainly on our radar and we will be in touch. So finally on this, we've been involved in providing data for projects such as the Swift Action for Swifts project, again led by the environment team at LCC, but also involving partner organisations, which has been successful in securing over £70,000 for new Swift boxes. So moving on to a project we're just starting to think about really, and that's our habitat data. So at the moment, we hold a lot of habitat data, but it's in a number of different formats, including older records still on paper, as well as more recent records which are digitised on GIS. However, it's not an easy task as there are many variables within it that makes a composite layer difficult without a single number of caveats. For example, since the 1990s, most habitat surveys have followed the Phase 1 methodology. However, the biodiversity metric published in support of biodiversity net gain uses UK HAB system of classifying land. There have been links made between Phase 1 and UK HABs, but should we be converting data from one system to another, or should we be preserving it as it is? If we convert it, will we lose some accuracy? But if we keep it separate, how do we interpret it? How do we verify habitat data? We're all familiar with the difficulty in verifying species records, but how does this apply to habitats? We can do some basic verification or validation from aerial photos, but that's no substitute for on-the-ground surveys. We often don't know the experience of third-party surveyors, particularly those that have come in on the back of planning applications and things like that. And does that need to be taken into account as well? Finally, on that point, really, be interested to have a conversation with anyone who has any ideas on this outside of the event. Do make contact with us. It's something that we really are thinking about, but really isn't as straightforward as it should be. So just before I finish, I thought it would be worth a reminder about who can access LRERC data. Our aim is to be a usable service rather than a shut box. Our records are shared with partner organisations such as the Leicestershire and Rutland Wildlife Trust. The Nature Spot team have access to our database to help with verification and distribution queries. And county recorders and coordinators also use our records to check their accuracy and to increase their knowledge on the distribution of species within the area. We don't tend to supply detailed records to other people, but can always provide a list of all the records that they have made or that you've made that occur on our database. And we're able to provide a list of species that have been recorded in a specific area, such as all species recorded within 100 metres of your house, or a well-known site such as a country park. And sorry, incredibly quick, but there we go, that's me finished. There's a lot more that can be said, but hopefully this gives you all an idea of where we're at, what we've been working on, some of our upcoming work and projects. Our team contact details are shown, and I would just say get in touch if you've got any comments on things or if you'd like to discuss anything any further. Okay, thank you.